cooperation documents and trade deals signed between Vietnam and China and Vietnam and the US. Startups grasp opportunities of Industrial Revolution 4.0. Hello and welcome to another edition of Bizline here on VTV International. I'm your host Hoàng Hằng, and we will begin the show with some economic highlights over the past week. As part of his official visit to Vietnam on November the 12th and the 13th, Chinese Party General Secretary and President Xi Jinping, together with Vietnamese Party General Secretary Nguyễn Phú Trọng, witnessed the signing of cooperation documents between the two countries. These documents include the connection of the two corridors and one ring with the One Belt, One Road initiative, speeding up negotiations of the framework agreement on building cooperative cross-border economic zones, establishing an e-commerce cooperation team, research the construction of new facilities of the two institutes of traditional medicine and pharmacy, developing cooperation in human resources, information exchange, identifying the list of key economic and trade cooperation projects, deepening cooperation in the field of electricity and renewable energy, exchanging information on inspecting and supervising banks, and enhancing border cooperation. During the meeting on November the 13th, State President Trần Đại Quang and Chinese President agreed that Vietnam and China should improve the effectiveness of cooperation in economy, trade, investment, agriculture, environment, and science and technology, and consolidate the material foundation for stronger bilateral ties. On November the 12th, President Donald Trump also started his official visit to Vietnam in the context of the U.S. being one of Vietnam's leading trade partners. Two-way trade between the two countries have been increasing steadily at 20% in recent years. At their talk, State President Trần Đại Quang and President Trump witnessed the signing of cooperation agreements worth a total of $12 billion, mostly in aviation, petroleum, and seaports between the two countries. Meanwhile, during the Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc reception for President Trump, the host and guest exchanged specific measures to promote the economic trade investment partnership, focusing on building a win-win cooperation framework, minimizing trade investment disputes, and implementing more effectively signed economic deals. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc said Vietnam has been improving its business environment and welcoming U.S. companies. He thanked the U.S. for opening its market to Vietnam's star apples and proposed the U.S. consider the import of Vietnamese mangoes and other fruits, while simplifying import procedures of the catfish inspection program, and soon launch a working group on the recognition of Vietnam's market economy mechanism. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc, along with ASEAN leaders and partners, joined the 31st ASEAN Summit and related meetings on November the 13th in the Philippines. Within the framework of the summit, Vietnamese Prime Minister had various meetings with leaders from ASEAN members and partners to discuss economic cooperation with Vietnam. Prime Minister Phúc also attended summits between ASEAN and the bloc's partners, including South Korea, Japan, China, and Canada. One notable event is the meeting on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, where Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc and leaders restated their determination to accelerate negotiations to achieve agreements between ASEAN and Australia, China, South Korea, India, Japan, and New Zealand. The leaders agreed to direct ministers and negotiation groups to boost progress of the talks next year, focusing on markets, cooperative principles, and removing differences in development scales of economy and level of commitment among members. On Wednesday, a seminar on growth motivation for Vietnam's economy was held with focus on analyzing positive economic changes, especially in growth quality in the last 2 years, and discuss solutions to generate growth motivation for the 2018-2020 period. Experts at the seminar widely agree that while Vietnam's development relies a lot on the FDI sector, the connections between FDI and domestic enterprises are still limited, leading to modest growth for domestic enterprises. Thus, changing growth model with a focus on specific industries is a must. In addition, Creating more favorable conditions for the private sector to make it a real driving force of the economy has also been noted by many experts. The National Assembly passed a resolution on next year's budget estimate on Monday, with budget deficits set at 3.7% of GDP. This is aimed to ensure enough resources for spending on development investment. According to the government, budget collection was estimated at more than $57.86 billion and spending at nearly $67 billion next year. The resolution ratified the increase of basic wage of state employees from 1.3 million Vietnam dong to 1.39 million Vietnam dong from July the 1st, 2018. Those are some highlights in the economic scene. Up next, we will look into how Vietnamese startups can benefit from Industrial Revolution 4.0 in our crosstalk. The Industrial Revolution 4.0 has drawn great attention in recent years. Experts believe that the revolution has opened up opportunities for all, including small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as startups once they have good preparations. The strong startup movement, especially in technology sector, is regarded as strength for Vietnamese startups to make the most out of such opportunities. So what prospect does the fourth industrial revolution offer to the startup community in the country? How can they take advantage of those to succeed in both domestic and global markets? We will find out in this week's episode of Bizline. But first, let's take a look at the following clip to see what the Industrial Revolution 4.0 entails.
The first industrial revolution was associated with mechanization and the emergence of steam engines. The second focused on electricity and mass production lines. The third one featured a breakthrough in information technology and automation. And Industrial Revolution 4.0 signals the appearance of virtual management systems. Some of the common factors of Industrial Revolution 4.0 are the development of robots, artificial intelligence, 3D printers, and breakthroughs in biological processes. A distinctive feature of this revolution is speed.
Joining our Bizline is Eddie Tai, partner of 500 Startups, to discuss about the issue. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me here.
Industrial Revolution 4.0 has been a hot topic in recent years. It is the revolution of different and new technologies, and some say that Vietnamese startups have a strength in technology. So what opportunities can the Industrial Revolution 4.0 offer to Vietnamese startups?
I think the Industrial Revolution 4.0 is actually an imperative not just for Vietnamese startups, but for all Vietnamese companies. Industrial Revolution 4.0 is a new world that we can't fully imagine now, where all the things that were strengths here in Vietnam, like the labor in the farms and in the factories, that is no longer going to be as relevant anymore. So we need to build Vietnam up for the next generation of technology capability. So it's both existing companies adopting artificial intelligence and robotics to do more with less, as well as for Vietnamese startups to develop the technologies for Vietnam and other countries that don't exist today. I think Vietnam has a great technology foundation. We have great math and science here, in education here in grade school. The capability of engineers here is rapidly catching up with the rest of the world. But I think, at least, we probably need another few years for Vietnamese engineering talent to really catch up with the cutting edge that we see in China, in San Francisco, and so on. But that catch-up is happening quickly. When we were first looking at technology here in Vietnam several years ago, the engineers were not capable of nearly as much as they are today. Back then, it was more quality assurance and so on. Today, we can build deep artificial intelligence in specific contexts. And so we need to see that continue to grow.
Which sectors, in your opinion, have the most potential for Vietnamese startups?
The ones that I'm most excited about for the next few years are where Vietnamese have a deeper understanding than their counterparts in San Francisco or other places. So what do I mean by that? I mean, Vietnamese understand what it's like to have a very agricultural-oriented economy. Vietnamese understand what it's like to have a population that is still coming out of poverty, that is still an emerging economy. And so, unlike in San Francisco, where they only understand rich people's problems, here we can solve for problems for the entire emerging markets. We're seeing startups in agri-tech. We're seeing startups using AI for learning English as a second language, or learning other things that people take for granted in America, but is very necessary here.
Equipped with smart technology, these plants do not require any maintenance to grow. All the care has been automated, from watering and fertilizing to adjusting lighting. All connections are controlled by smartphones via the internet. This is one of the many smart products that use technologies related to the Internet of Things.
Quan trọng nhất là cái con chip để kết nối với Wi-Fi, thì đó là một cái đặc trưng cho cái thiết bị IoT, là mọi người có thể điều khiển và giám sát tại bất kỳ vị trí nào.
Besides, fintech has recently become popular in Vietnam, using images of familiar animals such as turtles, elephants, and buffaloes to reflect the characteristics of each investment portfolio is one of the distinctive features of this automated financial consultancy website. The website seeks to offer young people simple solutions to making investment decisions with limited capital.
Cá nhân mình thì xuất thân từ tư vấn tài chính và tài chính chuyên về đầu tư, và đội thành viên của mình cũng thế, và những người chuyên về mảng công nghệ, thế nên mà mình nghĩ là bọn mình có thế mạnh ở mảng đấy, nên mới quyết định đi theo đường fintech, cộng thêm tư vấn tài chính tự động là một cái fintech khá là mới tại Việt Nam, và bọn mình là những cái robot advisor đầu tiên, thì mình nghĩ đó là một cái cơ hội rất lớn để cho mình đi theo.
Though some startups are still in their very early stages, they have received good feedback from investors.
They're still in the early stage, but it seems their ideas are very amazing. They're very into the robo-advisory and the mutual fund, and they're targeting the millionaires in this market. So if they find the growth driver in the long term, I think they'll be pretty successful in the market.
Vietnamese startups have grown rapidly in the past few years and span a number of sectors such as finance, healthcare, education, agriculture, and tourism. At the recently held TechFest 2017, some 200 startups showcased their products in those fields, attracting the attention of both domestic and foreign investors.
Vietnam has seen the establishment of several startups involving artificial intelligence and Internet of Things in recent years. As an insider, what do you think about the ideas and also the feasibility of these products?
Most of the ideas right now are what we can say derivative. They're looking at what somebody else has done somewhere else and say, hey, I know how to build that also. That's good practice, but that's not enough. We need to do more than just copy what's happening somewhere else. We need to find the real solutions for problems that aren't being solved yet. And so I see some of these startups here that are doing that. The rest, I think, will find out that will learn this lesson, and hopefully in the next 1 or 2 years, they will take what they've learned from this current effort and apply it to something new.
Some say that niche market is a safe choice for startup to compete in the long run. So what kind of niche market do you think Vietnamese startups have the potential to develop?
So by niche market, I think the real safe choice is to dominate a market and dominate solving a specific problem. So going back to what I said earlier, I think the opportunities for Vietnamese startups to be niche is to solve very specific emerging markets problems. Things around how do you optimize for rice growing, or how do you optimize the agricultural supply chain using artificial intelligence, using robotics or self-driving, anything around in Industrial Revolution 4.0. As opposed to, again, trying to just do something that Amazon or Apple or Google is already doing. That's going to be a very difficult fight. go and win a market that doesn't exist yet. There's one company that we've invested in called ELSA, English Language Speech Assistant. It's founded by a young Vietnamese woman who studied at Stanford and so on. That is solving the very specific problem of English language pronunciation. It tells you some words on your phone, you pronounce the words into your phone, and it gives you instant pronunciation feedback. Syllable by syllable, what did you pronounce correctly, what did you pronounce incorrectly, and if it's incorrect, how can you correct the pronunciation? It's a very niche market. It's not something that people in San Francisco think about because they already speak English. Those are the kinds of opportunities I like to see.
Now, would this be a good opportunity for Vietnamese startups to go global?
Yeah, I do. Vietnamese startups can already go global. We've already seen global startups developed largely on Vietnamese tech talent. Some of the more notable ones might be Misfit Wearables, which is a wearable device manufacturer, Vietnamese-American founder, but and Vietnamese engineering here. That sold for $260 million a couple of years ago. Atlassian, which is an Australian company building for global audiences, was developed by hundreds of engineers here, along with other places. So we know that a capability exists, and so it's just a matter of how much of the opportunity will Vietnam capture as opposed to certain other countries. It's an opportunity, but we also have to move quickly. China is investing a lot into these fields as well, and of course the U.S. is quite advanced with these technologies. So we have to embrace it fully, and it can't just be young startup entrepreneurs doing this. They need support from government, which the government has been providing more and more support for. They need support from existing companies who are the potential customers and the potential investors into these startups. And I think there's always room for improvement in terms of the support that's provided. At the end of the day, though, it's the number one factor for success for any of these is going to be the founders, and that's what makes me the most optimistic.
Handwritten text is automatically transferred to a database. This is how Flex Scanner, an auto-documentation tool using artificial intelligence, works. It is the main product of this startup, which targets a niche market.
Phần mềm của mình chỉ hỗ trợ cho một cái phần kiến thức nhỏ, ví dụ như là hỗ trợ đặt lịch họp hoặc là truy vấn các cái thông tin liên quan đến cơ sở dữ liệu của doanh nghiệp. Ví dụ như là trong doanh nghiệp đó họ có rất là nhiều các loại văn bản khác nhau, qua quá trình làm việc họ tích tụ được, nhưng mà họ sẽ chỉ được nhớ ở trong cái server, trong cái cơ sở dữ liệu, mà họ không thể tái khai thác được những cái loại văn bản này.
Cinnamon AI Lab is not the only startup in Vietnam following this strategy. Besides, 97% of Vietnamese companies are small and medium-sized with limited capital, and not all of them are willing to buy such AI products. Therefore, several startups choose foreign markets instead of domestic one.
Với cả một cái công ty SME với khoảng tầm 50 đến 100 người thì dù mình có tiết kiệm được 1 đến 2 tiếng những làm việc giấy tờ của bạn nhân viên đó trong một ngày, thì cái gọi là cái ảnh hưởng của công nghệ cũng chỉ là bằng 100 đến 200 tiếng trong vòng một tháng, và chỉ bằng lương của 1 đến 2 bạn nhân viên ở Việt Nam nhập liệu, và cái chi phí đó là rất là nhỏ so với doanh nghiệp.
To go global, many startups seek foreign investors or work with foreign partners to expand their network in the global market.
Demeter trở thành đối tác chiến lược của Intel tại Việt Nam trong mảng nông nghiệp. Và thông qua Intel thì Demeter được giới thiệu hơn 35 quốc gia trên thế giới. Và hiện tại tụi mình đang hợp tác với Malaysia, Thái Lan và Nhật Bản.
Working with international partners is also one strategy of Vietnamese startups to better understand such foreign markets.
What should Vietnamese startups prepare in order to compete in foreign markets?
It starts with the founding team, as well as a very focused product that's solving a real problem in a way that's substantially better and substantially cheaper than anything else. So I'll go into each of those. The founding team is what all investors look at first, because it takes just so much effort, not just to build the product, but to evolve the product and then to continue to make it scale across other markets. And unfortunately, what we often see in founding teams, not just in Vietnam, but other places, is that the founders maybe are quite lacking in something. Maybe all of the founders are technical and they don't have business people, or they're all business people and none of them are technical. So having a well-rounded, complete team is very important. There are many other factors around the founding team as well. Now, assuming you have the founding team in place, then it's about working on the right product and making it scale. And we definitely want to see founders who are building products that don't exist already. Not just copying something somewhere else and saying, oh, but my thing is 10% cheaper. I want it to be 90% cheaper and 90% better, or something very order of magnitude better. That is the only way that Vietnamese startups should expect to go global, because again, there are people doing these things all around the world.
Now, foreign investors are interested in Vietnamese startups, but startups themselves have to make a strong case to really persuade investors to invest. So what should Vietnamese startups do to really attract such inflow of capital into the Vietnam's startup ecosystem?
There's many ways, fortunately, and it's a lot easier today to learn about that than it was 10 or 15 years ago when the pioneers of the technology sector were coming here. Now there's all kinds of resources available online. Many in English, but also in Vietnamese, that help explain what is it that a venture capital investor is looking for in terms of an investable project. What are the things that a founder needs to do to prepare, and so on. There are also programs that are arising now to help prepare founders. Topica Founder Institute is an accelerator here in Hanoi that has existed for, I think, 5 years now. They spend a lot of their time training the founders how to talk with investors. In Ho Chi Minh City, there is one called Visa, which was invested in by FPT and Dragon Capital and a Korean investor. They are also doing a lot of work to help train the founders in their program how to raise the money. In practice, though, we are seeing a lot of what we can say is noise. So when founders approach us, often they are very underprepared. Because we want to do more than just invest, we're trying to help develop the startup ecosystem here. We are often providing access to these resources. We are letting them, come back here to talk with us over a series of times. But that kind of, I don't want to say generosity, but that kind of kindness does not necessarily exist with other investors. Other investors in the region, they don't want to waste their time talking to that. So I believe what the founders need today, so in the last few years, there's been a lot of cheerleading for founders. You can do it, get started, there's a lot of opportunity. Now today, founders need a kick in the pants to somebody to help to say, like, okay, now it's time to get to work and be real, because this is a very competitive market.
A number of investor and venture capital funds have shown interest in Vietnamese startup applying frontier technologies. Now, what do you think about the legal framework for startup to approach these venture capital funds and for such funds to pour their money into Vietnamese startups?
I am not an expert in Vietnamese law, so I start with that. But I think there's work to be done here. For very well-meaning reasons, the government has set up laws here to regulate investment, particularly around foreigners investing into Vietnam. Those were for good purposes, but the nature of the investment required for startups today is different. Whereas a few months of process could be fine for a real estate project, a few months can mean life or death for a startup. The on-paper process for a foreigner investing into a company now can be as little as 2 weeks. But in practice, my colleagues in the region, other investors in the region, have told me that it has taken them anywhere from 2 to 12 months to complete an investment here in Vietnam. That is too long. What I would like to see, and what I have already started to share with different stakeholders here, is a fast-track process for foreigners investing into startups here. Instead of taking 2 to 12 months or even 2 weeks, I would love to see this happen in 1 day. If it happens that quickly, then I can guarantee much more investment will come here to Vietnam.
This year, Vietnamese startups have attracted the interest of more than 40 venture capital funds, a 30% rise over the last year. However, a favorable legal framework is still needed for them to get funding from them.
Doanh nghiệp khởi nghiệp thông thường đâu có nhiều tài sản để định giá như theo các quy định của nhà nước về định giá công ty đâu. Văn phòng thì đi thuê, có một số máy tính, có một số nhân viên, có hệ thống phần mềm. Thế nhưng những nhà đầu tư nước ngoài họ đánh giá là cái giá trị công ty của chúng tôi lên đến là hàng chục triệu đô la.
Some investors also expressed concern about the legal framework in Vietnam.
Có những người nói với tôi, bây giờ tôi có đem được tiền vào hay không? có dễ dàng không? Và nếu như tôi làm xong thành công rồi, có đem được tiền ấy ra không? Hay là lúc đấy lại bảo bất hợp pháp? Điều ấy rất đáng phải giải quyết.
The National Assembly approved the law on supporting small and medium-sized enterprises in June this year. It spells out regulations on venture capital funding for startups.
Cái quan trọng nhất là người ta được hoạt động một cách chính thống. Thế khi được công nhận rồi ấy, thì sẽ được hưởng một số các chế độ chính sách nhất định, ví dụ như miễn giảm thuế.
The law on supporting small and medium-sized enterprises will take effect on January the 1st next year.
Vietnam has seen significant improvement in the legal framework. Notably, the National Assembly approved the amended law on technology transfer and the law on supporting small and medium-sized enterprises in June this year. So in your opinion, how will such improvement boost the development of the Vietnam startup ecosystem?
All of these things that the government has been doing the last few years in terms of a lot of the conversation about the importance of startups and technology, in terms of passing these laws that are meant to streamline the framework for how startups arise, or even stopping some laws from being passed that might have been difficult for startups. These are generally positive signs. 5 or 10 years ago, a lot of people wouldn't have thought about governments like Vietnam or in other countries talking about this at all. So now that I can go and talk to foreign investors and say, the Vietnamese government is really proactive about this, it's very positive. But I think some of the things that are being done are modest. Defining what is an innovative startup, I think, is in one of the laws. It's not really very important. Or having tax breaks for the first few years of a startup's life is not very important, because most startups are not making profit in the first few years of their life. There are other things, though, that can be done. As I said, the streamlining of the process for foreign investors to invest is something that can be very helpful. Establishing mechanisms for startups to be acquired, or better yet, to be listed on, say, a Vietnamese stock exchange, that is an opportunity because that creates the profit potential. And continuing to invest in the education and infrastructure around startups would be helpful. So making sure more and more young people are very good with math and science, are more fluent with engineering in the context of Industrial Revolution 4.0, and then being able to build for a population that is more connected to the internet. Those would all be very helpful. The law on technology transfer is probably more of a long-term vision. In the short term, what that means is bringing technologies here to Vietnam, which does not seem to have an immediate impact on startups trying to innovate. If they're just copying, taking what's being working from somewhere else and making it applied to the market here. But in the long run, what that does is it helps Vietnam catch up to other countries faster. And once we are caught up here, then we can start to build the next stage of the startup. So that's great.
Now, recently, the Ministry of Science and Technology has officially launched the National Portal website for startup, which provide database about technologies and fund, as well as guidance for startups. So how can this, in your viewpoint, contribute to startup development in the country?
The more knowledge that startup founders have, the better. And there is right now no central resource that provides all of that information. The fact that the government has decided to try to do that for Vietnamese founders is again a positive signal, and I think a good first step. The challenge will always be, how do you keep that knowledge, that information up to date? The world is changing so fast, and different players are coming and going so fast. Technologies are coming in and out of style. So hopefully private sector partners can help the government keep this database up to date.
Once again, thank you for being here with us.
Sure, thank you.
Now, experts forecast that by 2020, the global market of Internet of Things will create nearly $2,000 billion of turnover. Meanwhile, the figure for artificial intelligence is expected to reach over $5 billion. Therefore, according to experts, if Vietnamese startups can have good preparations and strategies with proper support from the government, investors, and international organizations, they can take advantage of such opportunities to grow further in the future. And that's all for this edition of Bizline. For more of our programs and update, please log on to vtv4.vn or our YouTube channel at VTV4Go. Goodbye for now and thanks for stopping by.